Welcome to the Party Starters podcast with me, Kane Towning.
I know you're going to dig this.
I wanted to use this episode of the Party Starters podcast, my time and my platforms, to learn about the Black Lives Matter movement. I will be the first to put my hand up and say I am uneducated on the subject. I want to learn, I want to understand, and I want to play my part. Because to relate this to the music and nightlife industry, an industry that I love, that I work in every day and that I've built a career from, if you stripped away the music of Black origin, it would be a very, very sad place. If you took away the music of Black origin, the nightlife and music industry would not be as strong, would not be as powerful, and would not be as good as what it is today. If you sit now and have a look at your Spotify playlist or look at the majority of music you listen to in a playlist, I bet if you took away all the music that's come from Black artists, it would be a pretty dead playlist. And that's why I want to understand and do more for this cause. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm not telling you what to do. It is completely your choice, but at least get some understanding so you can make a better choice. There's people going to protests that don't know what they're protesting about. There's people posting black squares, including myself, that don't really understand the meaning. And there's just some absolutely ridiculous crap being wrote on social media, on Facebook. And they really don't have a clue what they're talking about. So let's listen, let's learn, and let's get some understanding. I believe this is a huge lack of education. Knowledge is power. With knowledge, we can overcome most problems. I'm speaking to other business owners that are now scared to speak out and to kind of, put their hand up and say, I am uneducated on the subject because they feel embarrassed. There is nothing wrong with being uneducated. You need to speak out. You need to get the learning. You need to understand, and then you can move forward. So I'm bringing two guests onto the podcast, Alex Simmons and Danny Evans. These work for a company called Intermarketing. This is a global marketing company, and these guys head up the diversity within this company. They are now helping other organizations and individuals with the Black Lives Matter message and educating them and finding out what they can do to help. Both have experienced racism. Alex has experienced racism in the nightlife and music industry here in the UK. Danny has spent some time in America playing basketball, where he has been a victim of racism, as well as the UK. This isn't a sob story. We're not asking for any sympathy. We just want to find out how racism looks in today's world and what we can do to combat it. So welcome to the Party Starters podcast, Alex Simmons and Danny Evans.
I know you're going to dig this.
Danny and Alex, thank you very much for your time and educating me on the Black Lives Matter movement. Just to start from the very, very basics, Danny, can you explain exactly what Black Lives Matter means?
Right, so Black Lives Matter, I think before you think about the protests and all the things that are going on right now, I think it's important to talk about the discussion of what Black Lives Matter actually means as a slogan, as a phrase. There's a controversy of people who don't quite understand it, that say, like Black Lives, it's not only Black Lives that matter, all lives matter. And any sane person, unless you're, a far right extremist, knows that all lives matter. Everyone that's saying Black Lives Matter knows that all lives matter. But it's the point that for so long, for generation after generation, in America, through the visceral videos and stuff of police brutality and things like that, and all around the world, Black people have not been, their lives haven't, whether it's through systematically or through verbal racism or physical racism, that's not been the case. Black lives literally haven't mattered. So it's just a case of everyone knows all lives matter, but Black lives have been treated like they haven't mattered. So it's just, Black lives do matter, and that's basically the simplicity of it.
Okay, and I always like to try and find the very root cause of a problem. So how far does this go back, and what was the very root cause of racism? Was it the slave trade in America predominantly that started it?
Yeah, so I mean, predominantly America, but part of what I'm going to talk about a little bit later on is, people over here in England don't really understand the history of it. In school, and it's something I'm very passionate about is getting into those conversations with people that have control over the education system. It's important that people know the truth behind, the British slave trade and colonialism. And we literally sent slaves from Africa to America. Like, we did that, and then we went to America and founded America, and they started, and through the revolution, now we separate ourselves from that, and it's an American issue. But really, we had a very big hand in that. So I think it's just the education of it, and when you ask the question, how far back does it go? We're talking, as long as history has gone on since the white man, who, whether it be a British white man, whether it be the Belgian colonization, or the Spanish, etc., going into Africa and literally taking thousands, hundreds of thousands of Black people and just profiting off them as slaves and trading them. That's how far back it goes.
So that initial problem right there, why was it Africa? What?
It was just people, the white man going over there and exploring and wanting to explore, and they came across the people that might not, because of technological advances, not have been quite so advanced.
And with it already being a poor country, it was an easy target.
Well, in them days, it wasn't. They were fine, and this is another thing that I want to. I've kind of learned myself. I'm mixed race. My family is Jamaican heritage, and before that, they came over from Africa. But it's something that I've learned about myself very recently. Is that we're talking 1500s. There was kings and queens, and they had grand empires. So the richest man, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, Mansa Musa. He's the richest man that has ever lived on planet Earth. It's told, it's history, it's known. He was a Malian king, Malian Empire king, and he had this. I mean, you can look it up after this, viewers at home or yourself. He had a vast empire. We're talking like worth of 500 billion today. He had back then, through gold, through natural resources. And no, that story is never told. Like Africans were fine before the white man came and literally stole it from them and used it for themselves. The Gold Coast in West Africa, and the Ivory Coast. The white man named those regions because of what was most profitable to trade from there. And that's where it goes back to.
So it wasn't actually the result of Africa being a poor country. It was just explorers going over there in numbers and kind of forcing their way into the country.
No, yeah, exactly. And then through that, all the minerals were taken from them, and then they were left with nothing. And that's what we now, through media, like when you're growing up as a kid, and myself too, you think Africa has always been poor, it's always been barren, there's always been, nothing there, huts, and that was it. And that's because of the media and the way it's portrayed, and we don't get taught about that far back in Africa's history in schools. So we have generation after generation of people in the Western world that grow up never knowing that stuff.
Yeah, well, it's good to know the history of where racism came from and get some better understanding around that. Alex, have you got anything you'd like to add to that?
The funny thing is, when you actually look back in history, is that the first people in the world, the oldest person today, it was African women. We were all formed. So in your DNA will go right back to an African woman. So we're all from the same stock in our DNA. We're all got African DNA. Every single person on the planet, it goes back that far. And I think we're all people together on this planet. I think in the latest Black Lives Matter movement, when you say, well, where does that come from, rather than way back in time, I think it started in 2014 after the death of Trayvon Martin. The actual campaign was a result of, if you look into the death, a young kid going to the shop literally for Pepsi and Skittles, was pursued by like a neighbourhood watch guy who pursued him with a gun through a neighbourhood. Was told, you can hear on the call to like the headquarters is linked up to, don't pursue him. We don't need to pursue a kid who's just walking through a neighbourhood. There'd been some issues in the neighbourhood, and he thought because this kid was young and black, he'd pursue him. And you can hear him talking on the call. They end up in a tangle on the floor, and this guy who was the armed man pursuing a young black kid who was unarmed shoots him, kills him, and there was a law, the right to defend yourself. So basically, he got off in jail. He got off in court, allowed to go free.
The policeman.
Yeah, it's not a policeman, like a neighbourhood watch guy. He wasn't even a policeman. But he was armed, and he got off in court. And that was the start of Black Lives Matter. And that's where the campaign comes from. And over the last few years, it's been running in Leeds 5 years, but it's a global network. And obviously, it's been globalized in terms of reach, awareness. It's trended on all social medias because of the video that comes out of George Floyd. Absolutely atrocious, disgusting. His murder, and it's just resonated with everyone around the world. And you look at Ahmaud Arbery, if you some of these people, if the people listeners just look into Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Nina Pop, some of the killings that have happened recently, it's been so often. If you look back, particularly in America, with the police, and I think a lot of it is to do with the gun culture over there, and the fact that it's just decisions are made in a split second that cost lives, and we don't have that gun culture in the UK. So I don't think we have the end result like Americans have. But I still think there's systematic racism in this country. I think it's different, and as a guy with dual heritage growing up, and someone who's been through the club scene, the amount of times people have said to me, "Oh, you're all right for a black lad," or in a club, when you either, if I'm going to another town, I don't know, bouncers and stuff, oh no, not tonight, mate, not tonight. No reason, just I think they'll look at me and think, Or even worse, any club you go into, you get in a game, mate. It's just like, I must assume like I look like a drug dealer for whatever reason. Is those little things like that, that's the negative stereotype around black people that I find personally, and in my life, as somebody who grew up with a white mother in a very white area, in a very white school, we went to the same school, you become numb to it. It becomes part of your everyday life. And it's only when my dad died and I went over to the Caribbean to his funeral and met more of my family. I met my brother and sister about 10 years ago now and got to know them really well. It was like an awakening for me. Then my role came, so a lot of people listening to this podcast will know me from DJing, from promoting, from music, but and we will do a separate one. I'd just like to say I've listened to all your podcasts and I think they're brilliant and it's great, and I can't wait to share my story. This is, for me personally, what I do now as a day job. I'm head of diversity for a massive marketing agency. We lead the way in terms of diversity. We're the only agency in the UK that I've found and come across with a head of diversity, and we're all about making our culture internally more equal, inclusive and diverse. And then we help a lot of brands as well. So for me, I can talk quite openly about positive action, about education, but the Black Lives Matter movement now, I think it's gathered too much pace for this just to tail off. Most campaigns you see of 2 weeks of massive hype, massive chat, but I think that this now has got too much awareness. Too many people have been touched by it. And I think that there's a lot of people in the UK, people like myself, who probably accepted forms of racism growing up. And all of a sudden they can relate to it. It's very relatable. And yeah, listen, I've actually been dragged out of my car at gunpoint in Wortley, in Leeds, because I was mistaken for a gangster. And someone thought I was somebody else, tried to arrest me as somebody else. And I got pulled out of my car at gunpoint. 4 cars around me, pulled me out, put me on the ground, cuffed me, started to arrest me. I'm like, I'm not this person, I'm not this person. They checked my details in my car. Nah, we've got the wrong guy. There was no apology, just on your way. And that happened in Wortley at gunpoint, armed police. And I get they're looking for people, whatever. But it's like, would that have happened if I were a white guy? I'm not sure. I just think I felt like there was no apology. There were no they just obviously had information that this person was in Leeds and that I looked like that person. And it's just like another one. I'll give you a good example now. Me and Danny Bond worked together for years, promoting nights. I reckon I've been stopped in my car about 30 times by police. Easy 30. Whereas Danny, never. And like we drive the very similar car for many years, both driving around at night. Fair enough. But to be stopped the number of times, and it got to a point where I just laugh. I just wipe window down and go, what is it today? And it's just like, especially when I lived up at Bramwell, because living in a nice area, it's quite a white area. The amount of times I've been pulled driving at Bramwell. It's just like,
Yeah, I think the examples you used of the stereotypes, I think that's a really relatable form of racism in today's society. I think everyone will be able to relate to them examples you've said of people stereotyping black people for them things. And the George Floyd killing is on just a whole nother level. I mean, that's just crazy and has really ignited this whole movement. Danny, how does racism look here today in the UK?
I think there's many different forms of it. I don't know if you've heard of the term microaggressions, and that's things like kids microaggressions. So that's things like it's little things. So it's things like oh, can I touch your hair? If it's a black girl who has like nice bushy hair, like no, you can't touch your hair. You can't just go and touch someone's hair, and that's them, and but because they think they can go and do that, or little comments, like little things like what Alex mentioned then. The same thing happened to my cousin last year down in London. He was outside a post office and he was with his boys. He was getting money out, and all of a sudden there was the police car pulled up beside him, armed police, hop out, get him down to the ground, like machine gun to his head. There's a video, and he posted it the other day actually. And they cuffed him, took him down to the station, mistaken identity. Did prints, did mugshot, everything, and just no apologies, on your way. And it's like, mistaken identity, like I say, and things like that. And I think,
like the stereotype.
Yeah, the stereotype. Like I said, there's many different forms of it. There's the everyday racism, and then there's the systemic racism, which is the fact that the chances of for ethnic minority people to get into higher positions in organizations, whether it be the police force, whether it be in education, like black professors, in the NHS, health department, things like that.
Yeah, and on that note, Danny, of there being very little black people in positions of, I guess, power within companies, what would you say to the people that say, well, look at how many black sports stars there are, some of the greatest sports stars of all time are black, and some leaders, look at the latest president of the United States, Barack Obama, who was black. What would you say to that kind of counter argument?
Yeah, I mean, of course, in sports, it's a little bit different. People are quite happy to when there's money involved, when there's a sport involved, go and cheer on the black guys that are playing for England in football. Whereas, so I think that to that argument, okay, players, that's one thing, but what about coaches? What about people that are in charge of the FA? in higher positions. And I think it's the same argument in America with the NFL. All these black players, all these black American football players, how many there's, I think of the 36 teams or 32 teams, there's 2 black coaches, like barriers there.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear to see when you explain it and look at it like that. And I think we're moving towards white privilege, which is another important topic. So can you just explain what white privilege is?
White privilege is the fact that as a white person, you might never have to think or worry or be even aware of the barriers that are there for people of color to get to certain points in life and to achieve certain things, because you've never been in the minority. You've never been the one that is outnumbered because of the color of your skin. Whereas people that black people or any ethnic minority, they have to work that little bit harder, and obviously it varies depending on the position, depending on the line of work you're going into. But you never have to be aware of that. And I mean, I think that is, in a simplistic form, is what white privilege is: never having to be aware of that.
Yeah, and again, I would agree with that statement. As a white male, I've never had to think about my race in any situation.
I think let's jump in there. I think there's a couple of videos I'd urge everybody to watch. There's really simple to kind of help you understand. I posted one by a fantastic woman called Jane Elliott, who were doing some amazing work as a white teacher in the 70s, showing kids. And the beauty of these videos, I posted one today on all my social channels. Just search Elliott Simmons on Facebook and have a watch of it. She's doing a workshop with her kids, full white class in America. And what she said is, do you know how it feels to be discriminated against? And well, no. And what she did is, she said, right, what we're going to do is split the class. All the people with blue eyes, you're on top to start with. And all the people with brown eyes, you're not as clever, you're dumb. And what we're going to do to you all is, you can't drink from the water fountain. You can't have the full lunchtime. You can't go back for seconds at lunch. And you got to wear a collar to show you've got brown eyes. And the kids, it's a fantastic little exercise that she's done. She does it over a week, and then after 2 days she switches it. So she says, I lied to you all, and switches it so the people with brown eyes then are on top. And the difference of the kids and what they learn to understand and how they feel about feeling like second-class citizens, feeling like they're not as clever and they're not treated the same and they don't have the same privileges in that class environment, helps them understand firsthand how it feels. And it's just the colour of their eyes. Really, really simple, very good. And I saw her talking as well. This is in the modern day now, talking about, just Google Jane, anyone out there, just Google Jane Elliott. Have a little look at some of her stuff. She totally gets it. And race was never an issue until the Spanish Inquisition, because that's how they distinguish between people, like who to basically kill, who to enslave, and have a little bit of. I'd encourage everyone to research, get an education, watch the 13th on Netflix, all about the 13th Amendment in American law. Very, very interesting. And I think people, what this is all about is opening your heart, opening your mind, and learning. Just before you form your own opinion, and everybody in the world is entitled to an opinion, but just do a bit of learning. Don't listen to Facebook, for God's sake. Don't listen to morons on there. For yourself, go onto YouTube, go onto Netflix, go wherever. Read some history about back in America, in Africa, like Daniel was saying. Another really good video is, I think it's just put white privilege race, and it's a guy's done this race of life, and basically everyone stood on the line, and he goes, we're going to race for $100, and everyone's going to run, and the winner gets $100. As black kids, white kids, everyone there. And he says, before we start the race, I'm going to make some comments, and if it replies to you, you can come forward. You take 2 steps forward. And it's saying stuff like, both your parents live at home. You've had a private education. You've never had to help your parents with the bills. You had access to a private tutor, and he goes through about 5 or 6, 7 different statements, and then he says stop and turn around, and you look back, and all these white kids are at the front because they've had all this privilege in life, and they turn around, and all the black kids are at the back. And one of them were, you only got into college because of your sporting ability. He didn't have to pay for college for his sporting ability. And he said, I'll tell you now, if we raced, I guarantee you one of these black guys at the back would win this race. But they might not now because they haven't had the same start in life. And that's the race of life. And it were a wonderful, really simple way to look at it. And when you're talking about the sports stars, really interesting. You look at the Hall of Famers NFL, Hall of Famers basketball, top sprinters ever, top boxers ever. Probably 90% are black. And I think a lot of that comes from being refined. It makes you resilient. What you go through makes you either destroys you or makes you resilient. It fires you up and drives you on. And I certainly have benefited from just rising above it, becoming stronger, thinking, I'm just going to get on, I'm going to prove it. I had a desire, a drive that were born in me from my dad, leaving my mum before I was born. 3 months before I was born, my dad left my mum. And it's like I had to be raised not really understanding my identity, really, really angry, and it forced me on it. And the amount, not having a strong black role model in my life totally affected my life because I never really understood half of who I was, half of my roots, my heritage. I had no understanding of it. And it made me angry, it made me mad, and that drove me on. And I look back on my life, and it's not till I'm older and I'm working in this sphere now in diversity, and I'm talking to brands every day, talking to national governing bodies and helping them with their diversity needs, and I'm still learning. And my eyes have been open because I've got myself into a mindset where I've accepted so much, and now I'm realizing, actually, yeah, that will bang out of order. And one of the biggest shames in my heart is I wish I'd have turned around more often as a young person in nightclubs, wherever, and said, you know what, mate, that's bang out of order. You shouldn't say that. Because although it didn't affect me, it drove me on. It could have destroyed someone else. And I think what we're looking at with this movement now is a lot of people realizing what's happened to them in their own life. A lot of people resonating with issues that are now being spoken about, that people are learning about. And it resonates with you, and you think, actually, yeah, that probably were a bit out of order. And now standing together and saying, you know what, change needs to happen. And it's really, for me, the most important thing is educating. And I think a lot of people now are standing together and saying, look, we're in this together, change will come. And what you've got, Kane, that's really, really powerful, you're very open-minded, you're very intelligent, you've got a massive network, and you can influence people. And what's really important is people like you understand where everyone's coming from. And then, for me, it's all about positive action. What happens after these protests? Who puts in action? What support the Black Lives Matter get? What voice the Black Lives Matter get when it comes to, and what companies? For me now, I'm working with companies and brands and national governing bodies setting what's called ambitious targets. So saying, right, well, let's have an audit of where you're at in terms of black engagement, black excellence, employees who are black, and what's your targets? Like, how many, there's not one person on a board in the whole of rugby league, I've been working on it recently, who's black. It's crazy. How can somebody, there's no one on the Sky team and the main presenting team who's black. So there's got to be things that improve, and we've got to set some targets and create some opportunities, because there's loads of talent out there, loads of ex-black players, but for some reason there's a disconnect between people playing the game, people running the game, and it's the people running the game who've got the power. And I'm not saying that black people should get jobs automatically. What I'm saying is that without diversity in power, you can't have a fair, diverse strategy, and you can't understand. So, for instance, an all-white board can't have an authentic conversation about the issues around Black Lives Matter because they have got no understanding of what it's about, because it's never been their life. It's like you said, you've never even thought about race because you've never had to. And if there's an all-white board making decisions and talking about it, they can't really, with any authenticity, put a strategy in place to take positive action because they don't understand the actual meaning behind it. So that's why these conversations are really important. It's important to bring people in who don't understand. It's important people who are keen to learn and who have influence. You've got massive influence, and it's really important that between us, whether we're doing a festival next year and we do something positively and you link up with all these amazing artists, just look at all the black artists who changed the world, and let's bring people together and do something amazing and keep raising the name up. This can't be a few weeks of a campaign. This has got to go on and on and on and keep drilling into education. It's all about the next generation. And who would have thought that people 10 years ago, if you'd have turned around to someone and says, you're not going to be able to smoke in a bar, they'd be going, well, you what? I love having a darting bar. Everyone smoked in clubs. I used to come home from the clubs and get a shower. Through education and through law, not one person would ever think of sparking a cig up now in a nightclub. So why not the same for being racist? Why not the same for racism? It's all about education and law. But people have got to be accepting of it. Everyone accepted wearing seatbelts in your car and not smoking in nightclubs. So why not the racism argument? That's about it.
Yeah, that's a good example of how people can change through education and law. There's no reason why that can't be applied to racism. And do you have anything to add to that, Danny? Alex has shared some of his experiences with racism in this country. Have you had any experiences with racism in America and in England?
Yeah, so Alex mentioned briefly at the beginning that I've been in America the last 5 years. So first 18 years of my life, I was in England, in Leeds. And then, playing basketball, I went out to America on a scholarship. And going through 1 year of high school and then in America, then 4 years of university, I saw a very different. So when I first went out to America, I think it was more of like Alex touched upon. You kind of get numb to it. It's everyday thing. You just learn to just deal with it and don't really draw that much attention to it. Because if you do, there'd be so many occasions of little things that it would just take you off focus of what you're trying to do. So,
and these are little comments that people just
the little comments that sometimes you don't even acknowledge in the moment, but now I'm thinking about it, there is so many of them. And so that was kind of my thought process when I first went out to America. And then I got out there, and the conversation of race and racial inequality is a little bit more different over there. It's a little bit more advanced. It's more openly talked about. It's still a lot of difficult conversations going on now, but a little bit more open to it. And went through college, there was a few instances, the same things, like everyday stuff. But there was a couple. One that sticks out in particular through my time in university was, so the way it kind of works in college, in university they call it over there. On my team, we'd have recruits. So I was in my second year of university, and we'd have a recruit come and stay for the weekend. And our coach would be like, "Oh, Danny, could you look after this recruit? He's a high school kid. We're looking to recruit him for the next year. Just show him a good time, basically." So I was like, "Yeah, cool, I'll do that. I'm a nice guy. Like, I take him in, he sleeps on my couch and whatever, and show him a good time." And so I was trying to set up to go to a party and for us to go out and to show him a bit aside from basketball. And the girl I was seeing at the time, it was like obviously frats are a big thing over there. So it's this big fraternity house, and they were having a party on a night. And I was like, "Oh, like, could you," to my girl at the time, I was like, "Can you like get us into that party? I've got a recruit. I want to show him a good time." She's like, "Yeah, no worries." I'm like, "Cool, sorted." We go to the house, and they're like stopping people at the door, and it's a bunch of white guys basically in this frat. And I get to the door, and I'm like, "Oh," like trying to call to the girl, and she's like pulling her face. So I'm like, this is weird. I'm here with my teammate and these 2 recruits that I've got that I'm looking after. And the guy's like, no, you can't come in. We're too full. I'm like, something's fishy here. Like this, it was cool like an hour ago when I was speaking to my girl and you didn't know I was black. And now I'm here in person. It's a big problem. And he had told her that it was cool for me to come, just hadn't mentioned that the color of my skin. I come to the door, get these suspicions that it's something like that. We get into a little bit of a heated argument. And then in the end, it was like, all right, I'm not about to hit this guy over this. Let me just go home. So we go home. Go text me the next day. And she's like, oh, yeah, he was saying like N-word this, N-word that inside. And as I'm walking away, I'm seeing people walk straight in. So I'm like, all right. So just little things like that. And I mean, that's kind of a big thing, but it takes its toll on you. And you know, over the years, constant things like that. It's like, how does that get addressed? Why does he think like that still in 2019? It was at the time, you know? And so,
wow, that was only last year.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that is just blatant racism. Anyone with any brain cells must understand that is just completely wrong.
Ken, can I ask you, Ken, you own a really popular club in town, and you've been stood on doors for a long time. How do you feel when a big group of black lads come to your door?
Our door policy and my life policy is, I don't care if you're black, white, blue, yellow, purple, gold. If you're an arsehole, you're an arsehole. End of.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what race you are. That is not how we make our decision. If you're an arsehole, you're an arsehole and you're not welcome. If you want fun, if you want a good time, if you're going to respect us venue, respect our door policy, the dress code, everything else, then you're more than welcome. But if you're an arsehole, you're an arsehole. And that's how we make our decision. It is not based on race or a group of black guys, whatever. You know, our decision is based on you as an individual, not...
Do you think, though, what I'm saying is, I know you really, really well, so I know there's not a racist bone in your body, but do you think that, I would say,
there's absolutely a stereotype, yeah, if that's what you're getting at, 100%, you know.
Yeah, 100%. So what I'm saying is that's in our industry, in clubs, that's something that needs to be broken down, because I'm telling you now, and not in Leeds, because obviously I know all the dominant Leeds, but if I go to, like, I went to Chester for a night out, Chester, could not get in anywhere. In every bar, it was like a different excuse. You've got trainers on. Next bar, no, not tonight. You're not dressed right. And it was just like, what is going on here? I could not get in anywhere, and it's just like,
oh, absolutely, that happens. You know, you'd be just lying if you said it didn't happen. Does it happen?
We're talking about positive action. What I'd say is, right, in our industry, how do we address that? How do we then make someone like me? Well, not me particularly, but a young black guy who's going out with a couple of his mates, his family, whatever, feel comfortable, feeling like when I walk to a door, I think, it's going to be an issue here. I was in industry, do we address these things? This is where the education process comes in, and the doorman, like, how do you tell a doorman, look, be all right?
Well, I mean, it goes back to what we're constantly saying here, which is education. It's all about educating people, looking at door staff specifically for the nightlife industry. You know, they all have to go through training. So this subject should be mandatory training in that program, just the same as bars. I mean, every company, every organization, every bar, every nightclub has to go through training. They will train all their staff. So this subject should be in all staff training. We've got a great member of staff called Hermione who reached out to myself and our general manager to suggest exactly that, putting it into our staff training. And it's such an easy thing to do. Everyone does training, so just implement it through your staff training.
I had an amazing conversation this morning with a national governing body who's going to be working with us. I can't say who and what it's on, but we were talking about putting diversity training for not only professional players, but for every amateur player in the country as well. Like, it'll be revolutionary if it happens. And the conversation I had was really positive. Like, we deliver diversity training through work, and it's great because the amount of people when I speak to and we do it like a training session, and they go, wow, I never thought of it like that. I never thought of equality like that. And it's just like when the penny starts to drop in people, and what I love about it is when people just think, and think differently, and they watch something, I think, and they can understand it. The best one I've seen recently is definitely the Jane Elliott thing, because it's a class of white kids in the 70s, and you think, wow, she had it on lock 40 years ago. Way over time. And it's like just, and even she spoke on, I saw something on Lamar Suarez Instagram. So after this, Kane, have a little look, maybe share it. And Jane Elliott, this woman now, is talking on a show with some black women and a white woman in America. And she's asking them questions, and they're getting it wrong. These black women are getting it wrong. And she's like, no, you're stupid. You're not understanding. Listen. And she is the best I've heard. And she's the best, honestly. And she's an educator. And that's the key. She's an educator. And she's saying, listen, it's all about education, this whole process. But what you're saying is right.
Yeah, it's going back to the education. And to touch on the awareness, I think this has got so much awareness now, and there is such a media and social media spotlight on it, that it's scaring companies who don't know how to communicate the message. They don't know what message they want to put out because they are uneducated, and they're scared. They're scared of putting something out there in case it's wrong, in case it's not worded right, and they get branded a racist or they don't understand. So there is definitely a scared element within businesses now who want to do something but are scared to do something in case they actually offend. And that's another barrier that we need to break. Businesses and individuals shouldn't be scared. If you don't know, like myself, speak out, get the education. Don't be scared. Don't be scared to make mistakes. Just learn and go forward.
I agree. I think that it's allowing yourself to be vulnerable. People, especially men, don't want. Yeah, they don't like to be vulnerable. And now is a time where it's so in people are so aware of it right now, hyper aware of it, that if you're not allowing yourself to be vulnerable now, then when are you going to allow yourself to be vulnerable? The conversation is there. Have it with people. Have it with people that you've known for years and you've never talked about it before. Just educate yourself in as many different ways as possible. And I think, like we said in this, is about positive action and positive change. And I've talked on this podcast so far a lot about the history of things, and the past is the past. No one, people have done, from all races, have done some horrific things in the past. No one can change that now. It's not about making people feel sorry for things that their ancestors did in the past. It's about what can we do now. You having kids growing up now, if we're just talking about the education system in schools, if they grew up now knowing that people from all races have made great advancements in civilization throughout history, then they will get a better, more well-rounded understanding of equality, and knowing that, no, it wasn't just, the kings and queens of the British Empire that made all these advancements. Other people have played their part too. Other races have played their part too. And then back to what we were saying about, the training schemes and the training programs. Yeah, it is easy. It's just about putting funding and resources into that and seeing how much of an effect that can have. Because yeah, it starts with the education of children, for sure, without a shadow of a doubt. But what about the millions of people that are not in school anymore? What are they going to do? Are they just going to stay racist until they die, and then we're just going to hope for the new generation to come through? Know that you got all the information you need in the palm of your hand in your phone. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need to be in school anymore. Go and take the time and educate yourself, because there isn't any excuse anymore. But for having that curtain of ignorance, if you want to, it might be a strong word for it, but not knowing that there's no excuse for that anymore, I feel personally.
Yeah, and don't be embarrassed. Don't be embarrassed if you are uneducated, if you don't know what you're talking about. It's you can only learn. And even going back to like them, the cops in America, again, it's uneducated cops. If them cops were educated, if they had to go through some form of training or, education, I'm sure the police over there would be in a much better position.
And I mean, police everywhere, like if police grow up knowing, because the same way that they're humans at the end of the day, and the same way that people in everyday society grow up with them stereotypes of what they've seen in the media, what they see in a rap video, or what they see in mainstream, just life, their perception of Black people, if we're going to concentrate, as we're concentrating on that, they're going to take that into their job. And if their job is a police officer, then it's obvious why they in certain situations they're that little bit quicker to pull the trigger, or they're that little bit quicker to like we said over here, like Alex mentioned, like the situation with my cousin getting pinned down and accused of mistaken identity. And you think about it, that Alex, you mentioned it, and I could see it in yourself. It affected you mentally, and it does. And you, like we said, they don't apologize. They say, "Oh, on your way." That is a traumatic experience, to be pinned to the ground with another human being centimeters from literally ending your life with a gun to your head. That is a traumatic experience, and that can't be.
And the thing is, with that experience on its own, is that listen, I think the police do a fantastic job under really difficult circumstances. I have no issue with the police in this country for the majority of the work they do. With that situation with me, I lost a lot of faith and trust in police. And the fact I've been stopped so many times by police, you just think, oh my God. But one thing I'll always say to everybody, the first person you call when you're in trouble is the police. So, and the police, they're under a lot of pressure. Like, I'm seeing protests, and like, not in the UK. Everything I've seen so far is peaceful protests. I've seen, obviously, the guys protecting the monuments, and I think that in itself is an educational, because they're struggling with their identity and the fact that that in their opinion they're protecting these national heroes like Churchill and people like that. Fact, if Churchill wasn't around, one of the most racist men in history would be around, and that's Adolf Hitler. Now, there's loads of learning you can do into that. So, listen, the monument at Coulson in Bristol, they've been campaigning for 100 years to get that town down. So I get that, but I think that some of the stuff you're seeing people jump on a bandwagon, destroying monuments, it is creating a lot of tension that might not need to be there with better education, better communication. I think that there's a big difference for me between racism and ignorance. And I'm just going to take it back to the bare bones. And racism, prejudice, discrimination, or antagonization, like when you antagonize people, antagonism directed against a person or people based on their ethnic group or racial group, and basically someone who's a minority or marginalized, whereas ignorance is basically a lack of knowledge or understanding. Two massive different things there. There's people out there who are ignorant who might say things because they're ignorant, saying, "Oh, you're all right for a black lad." Well, ignorant, racist. I think that to just label someone as racist is wrong. I think that you need to give people like information and say, actually, my mistake has been in the past just not responding and just being numb to it and being like, got on my life, when really should have said, you know what, it's not cool. Like, what you should be saying is this, and this is why. And me sharing that knowledge and having that conversation. And that one of the things that really struck me about Danny when we first started speaking is he said he thinks it's further behind the UK, behind America, in terms of having those difficult conversations. And I would totally and utterly agree with that. And it's like, in Britain, we just become very accepting and very kind of, oh, I'll just get on with life. And that's the British way.
I guess on that note, when you use the example of the smoking ban, you know, if you've seen someone spark a cig up now in a club, you'd have a word with them.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think it's got better at football as well. So I'm a season ticket holder at Tottenham, and obviously I work at the Leeds Rhinos, and rugby, for all its lack of engagement with the black community, we did a workshop on it the other night. You don't see much racism within rugby, although it's not a very black sport at all. It needs to do loads of work to re-engage with the black community. Whereas at football, you hear and see a lot of racism, and obviously it's a bigger sport, more people, but Tottenham in particular, it's one of the blackest areas in London. London is 13% black in total. Huge black community in London, yet you still see a lot of racism. So, but what I am seeing is, especially at football, from my experience where I've seen more racism, people will turn around and say, no, that's out of order. And I think that's actually got better in the last 5 years, even, that I've been going to football regularly as a season ticket holder. You see more, and the clubs are a lot better in football about on a match day sharing the message. But for me, it's like, it's all right saying it on a match day. How do you then do workshops, work with supporter groups, work with fan groups on a match day, reinforce that if people are being racist? How do you weed out this problem? Because ultimately, the worst thing, when you look in Europe and you're seeing the monkey chants and you're seeing the Nazi set signs and stuff, and there's large groups doing it together. As the groups get less and less and less, and it's 1, 2, 3 voices, that's when it's going to be eradicated, because people are naturally followers. And if we can get more and more education to people, that's the way to do it. But I think it's the club's responsibility. So think of it this way. It's the club's responsibility to back up. So on a match day, someone will make a racist comment. You'll hear on the tannoy, oh, our club is, diverse, equal, inclusive. We don't have any forms of racism within our terraces, and maybe even someone might get ejected from the stadium for being racist. But what I'm saying is, like, when a club's run by a fully white board, fully white management team, directorship, how then are they taking that issue and going, you know what, we've got a problem here. This is the reason why, and we need to eradicate that. If they can't feel it and understand it, and they've never experienced it, how can they truly identify with the issue and understand the issue? Because they've got nobody at the top helping them understand. And that's where you've got to see, like, so many. I remember John Barnes having bananas thrown at him on pitch. Bananas. And this is like when I were a kid. So this is in the 80s and 90s. And it's like, why not get someone like John Barnes, very an educated man, higher up in the FA, doing more work, specifically, like I work in diversity, get someone like John Barnes, a real strong black leader, someone with a great voice, articulate, educated, talking a bit more about the issue and helping it until people are at the top who can actually affect change. That's why I look at you, Kane, in terms of you've got that kind of personality and the connection to put something in place within clubs where club owners, bouncers, some kind of body of people who can actually make these decisions, like within licensing, speak to CAF or whoever it might be, to say, right, what can we do? What can I lead as a white man? What can I lead to change the perception within my industry? How can I do more? That's the thing. And you, because you've got such influence and such experience, and it might be a case of doing like a festival next year. We run festivals. We've got Made in Leeds Festival. What can we do? Can we do like a young, black and gifted stage? Do you know what I mean? And actually get people from the community and let's put a stage on at Made in Leeds and do something totally unique for our city and get young black talent with a headliner who's going to support that and create opportunities and just do something totally different. It could be all different musics, just young, black and gifted. just to support Black Lives Matter or make a Black Lives Matter stage. Let's do it. We've got a festival. Let's do it. Nothing stops us doing that. And I think that's when we challenge ourselves to do more, you've got the power. And as a white man who understands it or is learning to understand it, you'll think outside the box and think, right, let's make a difference and let's make a change. And I think that's what whether you're white, black, whatever colour you are, whatever race or religion you are, people in power have to take responsibility, be accountable, and try and do more. Do the right thing, even when it's the hard thing.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about education and learning, maybe not everyone's the same as me, but it gets exciting. Just listening to you guys now, I've got so many ideas and I'm wanting to learn more now. I'm wanting to delve more into it. And
it's power, man. It's power for sure. And I think I was talking to Abdul, who Elliott should be meeting next week. He's on the team. Been my best friend from young. First black president of the Law Society at the University of Leeds. Got from Gibson. Graduated from the University of Leeds in his bachelor's, and just recently got his master's a year ago. Doing great things. And we were talking about and obviously we've gone out in Leeds since we were 17, and we were like, what could be done to stop them instances of minor racism, all the way to large instances of racism on a night out. And we were trying to brainstorm and think, and it's hard because it's an environment where alcohol is involved and other things are involved, and people that if someone is not educated when they're sober, the all them things just come out when they're intoxicated. You know what I mean? And it's hard to police that.
Yeah, it is very hard to police, but again, it all goes back to education. It's about having staff at your venue and your door staff all being educated so that they can make educated decisions rather than decisions based on race. But there is instances as well where decisions are made, correctly, but you get some people then that do play the race card.
What do you call race? What do you call playing the race card?
So the race card is when a group or an individual comes to the door who clearly doesn't meet any of your entry policies. It could be the dress code, they could not have ID, they could have the wrong attitude, there could be a whole number of legitimate reasons, and they use their race as the reason why you are knocking them back. So even though you're following exactly what your entry policy is, they will use their race as the reason why you won't let them in the club. That is what playing the race card is, and what venues, door staff, face on a regular basis. Let's be honest.
I think that what that comes down to is for example, backrooms. So many times I've been right on that border of having the right clothing or the right shoes, and not having the right clothing, not having the right shoes. And sometimes I get in, and sometimes I haven't. And then it's if I'm in a group of black guys, or if I'm in a group of with white girls, the differences and stuff of what the outcome is. And I think it's for clubs in towns, it's having very clear, even if it's like a plaque on the wall outside of the club, what are the actual. So it's not a case of the bouncer has. Different bouncers have different discretions. It's very clear what the guidelines are for getting in, so that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's about having a really clear entry policy and making all that information available. I mean, we have like an essay of what you need to do to get into our venue, because we are quite an exclusive venue, and the amount of times we've referred to that, and that has helped us on the door, because it's there in black and white that you're clearly not meeting some of these requirements. But it is very difficult. It is extremely difficult, especially to implement a dress code these days, because there's so many different forms of fashion, and you could come to the door in an outfit, and then someone else could come to the door in the exact same outfit but have a completely different attitude. And you would knock them back. So fashion has, it's like saying you can't wear trainers. There's so many different forms of trainers. Some trainers you clearly wouldn't let in, but then there's other fashion style trainers that you would let in. So it is a difficult job, is that, but you've got to work with it. You've got to have a really clear entry policy.
And I think on the other side of that, it's once you're inside the club, once you're inside the venue, if something's said to someone, and like you say, if the race card is played, how do you distinguish between what is an actual act of wrongdoing and what is just something that isn't really that? But I think, like you say, if the security guy, for example, who that person goes to and complains about, is educated on what is acceptable and what isn't, then they'll be able to make a more informed decision of what actually happened. Okay, that's bang out of order. This guy's out. Do you know what I mean? I think that no tolerance.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to the training. If you've had training, if you've trained all your staff, there's no excuse for it inside or outside the venue.
I think what's really interesting to watch as well, and this is a hyper version of like a problem that exists in society. There's a video, if you ever look at it, it's the Amy Cooper video. It's only like a minute long, 1 minute and 9 seconds long. And basically this woman's, and this is a white privilege thing. This woman, Amy Cooper, is in Central Park walking a dog. And he's supposed to have a dog on a lead, and this bird watching conservationarians, a black bird watcher. And he says to her, "Oh, look, put your dog on a lead." And she's like, "No, what, put my dog on a lead?" And he's like, "Well, you're supposed to be scaring the birds or whatever." And he's videoing it. And she's like, "If you don't stop videoing me, I'm going to phone the police. I'm going to stop phoning the police." And she gets on the phone and she's like, "There's an African American man is harassing me in the park," and then she starts going into this like full on like crying, like being threatened mode. And if he wasn't videoing that call, right, police are going to rock up and completely take her side of this argument. These are guys running around with guns. Yeah, you've seen the problems in America, and like for a black man in that situation, all of a sudden, all the power's been taken away from him. He is in the total right. He's asking her to abide by the law. All he's doing is watching birds, and he's asked her to put a dog on a lead. And when you watch the video, it's insane, and it just makes you think, wow, she is totally
how quick she weaponized it.
Played the race card, but not just in a way. She's put his liberty under threat by it's tactically knowing exactly what to say, and the way her voice changes, like she's being aggressively attacked, and he's miles away from her. And she's like almost whimpering on the phone, like totally. And it's actually so sad that in 2020, like that's not long, that's weeks ago, this is happening still. And this is a professional woman. She lost her job over this video, top job. And it's like, but this is, if that's somebody's mentality, and you've got to think as well, this is a woman who's out walking a dog. She never expected to have this conversation. That is deep in her mentality to react in that situation like that, and to use it in that way to frame that man as an aggressor, as an attacker, as somebody who's putting her life under threat. You think to yourself, wow. And that when you talk about white privilege, that is right there, the top worst example I've seen recently. And when people say, well, it's not that bad, well, there you go. That's that bad. So just watch it.
I think what's so poignant about that specific instance when I watched it was how quick she was to weaponize it. And like you say, Alex, when you watch it, it's literally she's on the phone, she's telling a story, she emphasizes African American man. Like she raises her voice at that as if that's what's going to trigger the police to come quicker because she's in an uncomfortable situation. If I say that word with more emphasis, then they're going to come quicker. And it's like, so that's in 2020. That's a few weeks ago. I don't know if I learned about it in school very briefly, but the Emmett Till story. A young boy who was 14 in 1955 in Mississippi, and similar circumstances. He walked into like a candy shop or something, and I think he said something to the girl, or maybe wolf whistled, but not at her, but in her vicinity. And this is a white girl that was working behind the till. And this girl went and told her dad or something, some family member, that this black kid was flirting with her. These guys came like in a gang, a mob, found this kid, this 14-year-old kid, dragged him from wherever he was missing for a couple of days. His body ended up being found a few days later, beaten to a pulp. Like, you could not recognize him. If you go and look it up on Google, you couldn't even recognize his face. It's sickening what they did to this kid. And it's like, that was 70 years ago. And you just and that Amy Cooper's video is a modern day. Obviously, he didn't get to that point, but example of weaponizing the fact that it's an African American male, you know, and that's what was so scary about it for me.
Yeah, it's crazy that it's still happening, but just to kind of guide it into a more positive ending, you know, I think the stuff that's happening now is the biggest movement probably that's happened, and things seem to be changing. I don't think we'll ever go back from this now. I think education is key, and I do think it's going to change. I'm going to change most definitely.
I'd just like to finish off just saying, like, the world is going to change with this campaign. I think it's the fact that it's got proper global reach, and the amount of people who now are learning will never ever go back. Every business, every brand, every organisation, governing body has got a responsibility now to look at themselves really hard in the mirror, do an audit of where they're at in terms of engagement with not just the black community, across the whole diversity landscape, and look at the one thing I always talk about in my role is we make equality and diversity policy, which everyone has to have under the Equality Act 2010, more than just a piece of paper. And that's what everyone's got to do.
Yeah, it's more than having a piece of paper and kind of putting a tick in the box. We've got to do more now. It is a responsibility of everyone, companies, organizations and individuals. And I think it's definitely going to happen. So thank you both so much for giving me your time and education. It has been a pleasure.
Pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks for having me, Kane. Nice to meet you.
Welcome to the Party Starters podcast with me, Kane Towning.
I know you're gonna dig this.